I'm Jessica, 37, a nurse in Detroit, Michigan, and for years, I've carried a shadow from my childhood that I've kept buried deep. Today, I'm stepping into the light, sharing a story I've hidden out of shame and fear, hoping it might help someone else feel less alone. It's about losing my dad when I was just 8 and the man my mom brought into our lives a few years later, a man who turned our home into a place of dread. My dad was my rock, a sturdy guy with calloused hands from the auto plant on Woodward Avenue. He'd lift me onto his shoulders after work, his laughter filling our small house with warmth. But one rainy afternoon, a factory accident stole him away. I remember the police at our door, Mom's sobs, and the sudden silence that followed. At 8, I didn't understand death, only that my hero was gone. Mom tried to hold it together, her eyes red but determined. She worked long hours at a diner, then picked up nursing shifts, her hands trembling as she counted tips. I'd sit by the window, watching Detroit's gray skyline, waiting for her. Life was hard, but we had each other. Then, when I was 10, everything changed. Mom met Frank at a community event, a charming guy with a quick smile and a voice that promised better days. To her, he was a lifeline, a break from the grind. She'd come home glowing, talking about his kindness, his plans to fix up the house. I wanted to believe her. He moved in with a suitcase and a bottle of whiskey, his presence shifting the air. At first, he tried to win me over, bringing candy bars, teaching me card tricks. "We're a family now," he'd say, his breath smoky from cigarettes. Mom saw a savior, I saw something else, a unease I couldn't name. Detroit's factory hums grew louder in my head as his shadow loomed larger. One evening, while Mom was at the diner, he sat too close on the couch, his hand resting on my knee. I shifted away, but he laughed it off, offering more candy. I took it, confused, wanting to please Mom. But that night, as I lay in bed, I felt a chill, something wasn't right. His touch lingered in my mind, a warning I didn't yet understand. Frank's presence in our Detroit home grew heavier, and I, at 10, struggled to make sense of it. Mom was blind to his flaws, seeing only the man who brought flowers and cooked dinner when he wasn't drinking. She'd smile, recounting how he'd held her hand during a late-night walk along the Detroit River, her voice soft with love. To her, he was perfect, a contrast to the exhaustion she carried. But I saw the empty bottles hidden under the sink, the cigarette butts flicked into our yard, the nights he stumbled in reeking of bars. Mom worked 2 jobs, leaving me with him more often. At first, his efforts to bond seemed harmless, candy bars, stories of his wild youth, a pat on the head. I'd nod, clutching my stuffed bear, wanting to trust him for Mom's sake. But then, one afternoon, while she was at the hospital, he sat beside me on my bed, saying, "Let's rest together." His hand brushed my arm, then lingered, his smile too wide. I froze, my heart racing, unsure what to do. He'd give me more sweets, like a bribe, and I'd take them, too scared to say no. Over weeks, it escalated, his body pressing closer, his hands wandering to my legs, my back. I didn't know the word for it, but I felt dirty, wrong. At school, I'd stare out the window, Detroit's industrial haze blurring as I tried to escape in my mind. I told myself it was nothing, that he was just friendly, but my gut screamed otherwise. One night, he lay beside me, his breath hot with whiskey, his fingers tracing my shoulder. I rolled away, whispering, "I don't like this." He chuckled, "You'll get used to it, kid." Tears stung my eyes, but I stayed silent, fearing Mom's disappointment. The weight of his actions grew, a secret I couldn't carry alone much longer. Frank's behavior in our Detroit home became a nightmare I couldn't escape, and at 10, I was lost in confusion. Mom's love for him blinded her to the truth. He'd come home late, reeking of smoke and liquor, yet she'd greet him with a kiss, calling him her rock. I'd watch from the stairs, my stomach twisting, knowing he wasn't what she thought. With Mom working double shifts at the diner and hospital, I was left with him daily. His friendship turned sinister, candy turned to coercion. He'd lie beside me on my bed, his heavy frame too close, his hands roaming my arms, my legs, sometimes higher. I'd stiffen, my mind racing, but I didn't know how to stop it. He'd whisper, "This is our little secret," his voice smooth, like it was normal. I was a child, too young to name the violation, but old enough to feel its wrongness. At school, I grew quiet, my drawings turning dark, my teachers asking if I was okay. I'd shrug, hiding behind a smile. At home, I'd lock myself in the bathroom, scrubbing my skin, wishing I could wash away his touch. One evening, after he'd left my room, I heard Mom humming in the kitchen. Desperate, I ran to her, tears falling. "Frank touches me," I stammered. "It's not right." Her face fell, then hardened. "You're just jealous," she said, her voice sharp. "He's good to us." I pleaded, but she hugged me, dismissing it as a child's tantrum. The rejection cut deep, I was alone with my fear. Days later, his hands grew bolder, pinning me once as I struggled. Detroit's cold winds howled outside, mirroring my isolation, as I wondered if I'd ever be believed. Detroit tightened, and after Mom's disbelief, I felt utterly alone at 10. She saw him as her savior, cooking breakfast with a smile, oblivious to the monster he became when she wasn't home. His drinking worsened, bottles clinking in the garage, his cigarette smoke filling the house. With her at the hospital or diner, he'd corner me, on the couch, in my room, his hands wandering, his breath sour. I'd squirm, my voice a weak, "Please stop," but he'd laugh, "Don't tell tales, Jess." The candy bribe stopped, his touch grew insistent, pinning me once as I fought to push him away. I didn't understand the full danger, but my body knew, my heart pounded, my skin crawled. At school, I stopped eating, my clothes hanging loose, my friends drifting away. I'd sit by the radiator, imagining escape, but where could I go? One afternoon, after he'd left me trembling, I tried again with Mom. "He's hurting me," I sobbed, showing her a bruise on my arm. Her eyes narrowed. "You're making this up to break us up," she said, walking away. The rejection crushed me, I stopped talking, retreating into silence. Then, one evening, fate intervened. Mom came home early from the diner, her shift cut short. I was on the floor, Frank above me, his hands on my waist. Her scream shattered the room. "Get out," she roared, yanking him off. He stumbled, cursing, and fled. She sank beside me, tears streaming. "I'm so sorry, Jess," she whispered, holding me tight. Detroit's factory lights blinked outside as relief and pain flooded me. Finally, she saw. Frank was gone from our Detroit home, and after that night, Mom's world shifted. At 10, I clung to her as she held me, her apologies a flood of guilt. She called the police, but Frank had vanished, his threats lingering in my mind. We moved to a new apartment near Midtown, away from those memories, but the damage was done. Mom quit her second job, staying home more, her eyes haunted by what she'd missed. As a teen, I struggled, nightmares of his hands, a fear of men, therapy sessions where I barely spoke. I'd sit by the window, Detroit's skyline a reminder of survival, not despair. At 18, I enrolled in nursing school, driven to heal others, though I hid my past. Mom passed 5 years ago, her last words a tearful, "Forgive me." I married Mark, a gentle soul, but never told him, fear kept me silent. At 37, working long shifts at the hospital, I realized the silence was my prison. This story, my burden, needed to be shared. I'm glad Frank didn't go further, but his actions left scars, trust issues, moments of panic. Sharing lifts that weight, maybe it'll help a child speak up, a parent listen. If you've faced this, you're not alone, tell someone. Detroit's industrial hum, once my cage, now feels like a badge of resilience. Thank you for hearing me. Like, comment, and subscribe to my secret stories for more tales of courage and healing across America's cities.